Hey guys, I just want to let you know that I'm now a certified spiritual life coach. If you resonate with the topics and lessons that my guests and I discuss on my podcast, and you feel that you could use some empowerment and direction in your journey of becoming who you truly are, consider booking a free discovery call with me on my website at kindlemccullough.com. And now on to the episode. Hey guys, I'm excited. Today I have my friend Amy Felicity, and she's been my friend for a while. We found each other on Instagram. She's a poet and a spiritual person. I've always loved reading her poetry, and we connected and we talked. I've done some coaching with her. We've helped each other out with creativity and marketing and, just having great spiritual talks. And Amy does some psychic work, and I've done that with her, and it's been amazing. Amy wrote a book, and I thought I'd have her on to talk about her journey and her book and her next book and everything. I'm really excited to help others find her and all the awesome things she does. So yeah, thanks for being on, Amy.
Thank you so much, Kendall. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And obviously, as you can hear, Amy is from Australia. So she has a lovely, lovely Australian accent.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, so you just want to kind of get into talking about your spiritual journey and kind of who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Amy, full name is Amy Felicity Robinson, and I consider myself a poet, a philosopher, and an intuitive. So I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, I'm 33 now, so in like the 90s and noughties. And yeah, my upbringing was very, I guess you'd call it like atheist, kind of like quite typical for Australia. My parents, they did have like kind of spiritual beliefs and spiritual backgrounds, but for some reason they very much didn't talk about it with me and my sister. And they were absolutely wonderful, like beautiful people. So there's nothing against them, but they broke up or separated when I was quite young. So I was about 6. We'd only see my dad one night a week, and my mum worked very hard. She was in like the corporate world, worked late hours. So I feel like I was very much brought up on television and whatever my government school sort of wanted to teach me.
Mm-hmm. In the Matrix.
Yes, very, very much. And it was quite a typical upbringing, like maybe upper middle class. Went to an Anglican private high school. So they did teach us like religion and society. There was very little depth to it. We would read some Bible stories. I just remember growing up, like just not understanding like what a soul even is, or, the idea of God was what I saw in The Simpsons, like, and yeah, I remember it just all like looking back, it all just felt so one-dimensional. And I remember at the end of high school, having to write an essay about myself and like where I see myself going, or like what my high schooling has been. And I remember like thinking the only thing I could write about was the fact that I don't think. I was like, I just kind of go about every day thinking about what I have to do that day. Yeah, like looking back, it all felt like quite one-dimensional. And I remember like at the end of high school having to write an essay for English class about like who we are and what we believe and all that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking like, I don't even know what a belief is. Like I wrote about the fact that I don't really think. I just go about each day. What do I have to do this day? And then every day is the same. And I got an A+ for that essay. But I didn't have any like dreams either. I remember I want to be rich. That's my dream. And I just saw myself entering my corporate job. That's the way to get there. It didn't really matter which job it was. Just like, I'm going to work in an office. So yeah, I ended up studying business marketing at university. I was always very studious, like good at school. I could memorize things really well, so that always helped. And then I didn't really start getting into spirituality until I was probably about 24. I'd done like quite a lot of traveling before that, but all very, just typical like partying and drinking a lot. So there wasn't much, to it. But my first introduction, like my mum, as I mentioned before, she did have that spiritual side to her, and she always had like self-help books and spiritual books under the coffee table. But me and my sister honestly thought that she was a bit crazy. Like we're like, oh yeah. And she'd studied homeopathy and would tell us that you can heal with your mind. And we were like, no. So it's so interesting how like that schooling system can even like help, like make you not even believe your own parents. That's something that I like look back on with just some amazement. But she ended up giving me one of her books to read. Yeah, I was about 24, and it was Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And I read that and just started seeing like God in a whole new light, and just reading these things that I'd never even thought about. A lot of it definitely went over my head at the time, and I have since read it again last year, I think, and it's just sunk in so much deeper. But yeah, so that sort of planted a little seed. And then the thing that really got me questioning a lot, funnily enough, I think it was 2017, discovering the Mandela effect. So I don't know if everybody's heard of it, probably a few have.
Yeah, you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's this strange phenomenon where things in the past are different to how we remember them. So there's all these famous lines in movies that now are different to what many people remember them. Like in Star Wars, when Darth Vader says, Luke, I am your father, he now says, no, I am your father. I was just like tripped out. I was like, what is going on here? And that kind of put me on like a conspiracy theory rabbit hole trajectory.
Dark awakening.
Yeah, I was just like, what is going on? And then started learning about like the Federal Reserve Bank and just all of these things, probably some of them not true, but it just kind of opened my mind to like the levels of reality that are kept from us and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of just started like researching all these different things like mad. I got really into astrology, started learning about myself more, and eventually felt a big urge to go to Brazil for an ayahuasca retreat. So they say that ayahuasca will call you if it's meant to be. And I was like, it's calling me. So I booked a trip on my own, I think. That was probably, so I booked that in 2019 and I ended up going on that trip in March of 2020. So like right before or right as COVID was hitting. And I will say at the time I had just started a side hustle with my best friend. So was starting a business, was keen to get out of advertising, which is what I got into after my marketing degree. But yeah, I was starting that business with my friend. So it was kind of like opening up to this like personal power that I had and this power of creativity. Went and did this ayahuasca retreat, which was 9 days at this beautiful place called Spirit Vine Retreats in Itacaré, Brazil. And it was 4 ayahuasca ceremonies over 9 days. And that was kind of this first introduction to seeing myself from a higher perspective. Like it just pulls you out of your everyday mind and just shows you what you're doing. Like, and I just saw myself just constantly consuming media. Like, even when I was just walking on my own, I'd have headphones in listening to something. I just wasn't thinking. There was no time for contemplation. There's a whole lot of other stuff. It brought up things from my past and what they meant, and just all of these wild realizations. So it was like internally, all of these crazy shifts were going on. And then on the external, the world was like falling apart at the same time. So there was people from all over the world there. And there's a guy from Italy who's like, my whole city is locked down. And I'm like, what is going on? And these guys from Canada are like, oh yeah, when we get home, we have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And I was like, what the heck? I was like, that's surely not going to happen to me. I end up going home, locked into my 1-bedroom apartment with no outdoor space. And Melbourne just so happened to end up being the most locked down city in the whole world.
Wow.
So we were locked down, like businesses shut, everything, for 262 days over 2 years. And they made sure we were locked up until COVID was at 0 cases. So they'd be like, 2 more weeks, we'll get to 0. And then 2 weeks would pass and it was like, 2 more weeks. And it just extended and extended and extended. And so there was a lot of time for contemplation in that period, which, maybe it was just meant to work out that way. But the business that I was running, obviously it was difficult to get that started, but my friend and I were still really focused on making that work. And just, there was so much beautiful inspiration that happened between the two of us. But unfortunately, I think the lockdowns and just everything that was going on, I was on this path of having all these realizations and wanting to be a healthier, better version of myself. But unfortunately, my group of friends were in this like effort, let's get drunk, let's party mode. Like the world's falling apart, let's just go wild.
Right.
So yeah, unfortunately, I just started feeling more and more like I wasn't where I was meant to be. And I was just having so many epiphanies and realizations and these like fires going off in my mind and this awakening of my soul. And I just had to sort of voice what I was thinking. Like I was like, I felt like if I stayed where I was, something really bad was going to happen to pull me out of it. It kind of felt like I was reaching a dead end. And I'm just like, I have to tell my friends that I don't belong here. And so I basically like wrote everything I was thinking and I recorded it and sent it to them. And it was not received well, obviously. And everything in my life kind of blew up at once. So I lost my friendships, most of them. I lost the business, this massive dream that I had for this business, the thing that was inspiring me and everything. It was just all gone. And I was in this deep, deep, dark night of the soul, believing that I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. My life was over. The thing that was destined to happen for me, I just ruined it and was, having really dark thoughts. Like I should just give up. I need to start again. But that place was actually where I discovered poetry. The funny thing was, it was my business partner's birthday the month earlier, and she'd asked me to write her a book of poetry for her birthday. So I just wrote all of these like silly poems and then got everyone she knew to write one as well. So I gave that to her and then literally like never saw her again after that. It was like, it was really wild. But once I'd started writing, I basically never stopped. And I saw poetry as like, it was like when I was writing it, I was writing from this higher aspect of myself to this part of me that was so lost and scared, and giving her the words of wisdom and encouragement that she needed. And that was sort of how Amy Felicity Robinson was born, as this poet. And I know I'm waffling on, so I don't know if you have any questions
great.
or should I keep going?
Yeah, I'll just say that I've always, occasionally I write poetry. I did more when I was younger, but I always write it when I'm feeling very emotional, and it's like there's just no better container. It's like it has to be poetry. But
Absolutely.
if I'm not feeling super emotional, then I don't write poetry. So it's something that like I feel very called to, but it's also like just from time to time.
Yeah.
For me, anyways.
Yeah. I think I was shocked. It kind of felt like these pieces were like coming from outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they already existed and I just kind of had to write them to bring them out. It was a really strange and beautiful experience. And I was finding that I would write a poem and then like that week later I would get the lesson of it. Like there was kind of a bit of magic to them. And I decided that I wanted to start sharing them with the world. So I started an Instagram page and started putting them up, I think January 2021, maybe. The other thing that's interesting, when I was in that deep, dark night of the soul and everything in my life was kind of washed away at once, I just had this overwhelming desire. And then I just started talking to, whatever was up there, source, God. And I was like, I feel like I'm meant to write a book. And I'm like, okay, like you've pushed everything away. I promise that I will write the book. I have no idea what the book is, but I know there's a book and I'm meant to write it.
Mm-hmm. You like cleared everything out in your life.
Yeah.
Like, here's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was also such a powerful lesson on like the importance of telling the truth. Like I was in this place where I didn't feel comfortable and wasn't happy. And so many people will just put on a happy face and pretend it's okay and stay in something that they're not comfortable with for such a long time. And the power of words, like the things I said just literally caused an avalanche and just pummeled my life. But yes, so I made a promise that I would write a book. So I started like having all these thoughts, like, I felt like it would be a nonfiction book. So I was like, tips on following your heart or, getting out of situations that you're not comfortable with or something like that. And I just started thinking about my own journey and really starting that contemplative path. And I ended up, because everything was cleared away, I'd kind of lost my friends. Melbourne had been locked down for 2 years. It really wasn't a nice place to be. So I made the decision to move to a town 14-hour drive north. I just kind of picked one. I didn't know anyone there. I like packed up my stuff and went on my own and got myself an Airbnb for like long-term, 6 months. And funnily enough, as soon as I got there, I met the man I'm now with. So I met my partner like a month after I got there. And we've been together for 2 years now. So that was pretty amazing. I've met some absolutely beautiful friends. And I think maybe about 2 or 3 months after I moved, I had this like inkling of an idea. I want to write a book that looks at life as like a game. Like simulation theory was definitely a rabbit hole that I went down, and that was kind of this framework that I could really understand spirituality in, because I had come from this atheist, like science-based, logical background. And I know that there's been, books written about like the game of life and how to play it and all of that stuff. But I wanted to kind of, bring this like simulation science idea into it as well. And anyway, I still thought it would be nonfiction and I'd have to kind of figure that out. But I just had this idea, like, what if it's fiction? And I was sitting at my desk and all of a sudden this idea, like it felt fully formed for a science fiction novel like poured into my brain, and I was like just connecting all these dots, like, oh yes, that makes sense, that's how I can write this. And so I just spent like the next couple of weeks putting all of that into words. But it felt huge. Like it felt like a 3-part novel series. And I was like, oh my God, I've got the biggest task ahead of me. So I started like studying how to write a novel. I enrolled in a course online, wrote out the storyline, but each time I would go to write it, I was just like, this is just so immense. I don't think that I am able to do this. So I just parked it. I was like, maybe I'm not meant to write it. Maybe that idea was just for me and my understanding. But I kept writing poetry and I kept posting it. And then probably almost a year later, I just had this idea of what if I write this book in poetry? And went down to start writing, and it just started flowing out. So I have ended up writing this book. It's called 2318. It is a science fiction, spiritual, epic poem that looks at, spirituality from this futuristic, scientific kind of standpoint. There's a lot in there. It is quite difficult to kind of explain and pinpoint. But yeah, and that's sort of where I am now. I wrote that book over an 8-month period. And because it was similar to other poems I was writing, how I would write the poem and then learn the lessons, it sort of felt like this book was teaching me as I was writing it. And I would write a bit and then stop for a while and know that there was something I needed to learn before I could keep writing it. I finished that book about 6 months ago. And then since then, I feel like there's just been a massive integration of the lessons in there. So it's like I finished the book, but I feel like I still need to become the person who can talk about this book.
Yeah, then the book is finishing you.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Can I say real quick that it's interesting, you're talking about getting into simulation theory. I think and you're talking about atheism and then spirituality. I think simulation theory is kind of this interesting, it's all like your perspective on it, because you can take it in this sort of atheistic way, like, oh, nothing is real, we're like controlled. It kind of reminds me of like the Gnostic, like the demiurge, like the devil's in charge of the physical universe, and we're all under this power, we're all in the matrix, and we don't have like free will, and we're all destined for this, like this fallen evil world, whatever. But then you bring the spirituality, and you're like, okay, there's an aspect of darkness and trying to control things, and there is the dark awakening that you were talking about. But then there's this higher power that's good, that is helping us, and that is working through us to bring good to everything, to bring it all. Yeah, in a good way. And so it's just all the perspective you have. And then, of course, you wrote that in the book. And I'll just say about the book that, I listened to it because you made an audiobook of it. And, there's something powerful about hearing it, especially since it's in poetry. And I told you that I don't, other than Milton, like Paradise Lost, that kind of thing, I don't know of like a fictional work that's just poetry. So I think it's so cool, very unique in that way. And again, just that you address the simulation, but also the spirituality and the good side of it, and keeping the focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It was a really strange thing, and it's been since writing it and then kind of going back and trying to find other people who have done similar things, or what kind of genre this sort of fits into, has been a bit of a journey as well. I will say, though, I did miss a big part of the story. So once everything fell apart, I started putting myself through this kind of spiritual education, and enrolled in an astrology course. I did human design and psychic development, and a couple of courses in shamanic energy training. And yeah, psychic development was probably the biggest, I guess, contributor to being able to write this book. So I used the skills that I was learning in that course.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what that is? And like we had we met and had that interaction. Yeah, just kind of explain that.
Yeah. So basically the course was marketed for people that want to become psychics. And I thought that I did, because I've got very much into kind of, yeah, I think because everything had just fallen apart, it took a long time to build up trust in myself. Like trust, hindsight tells you that, and there was that voice that was telling me like, no, this is right. This is the right thing. But I did still feel very
torn.
Torn and untrusting of myself and worried that, one move again could break my whole life. So I got quite dependent on like oracle cards and psychic readings. And then I saw this beautiful psychic, Eloise Felke, when everything was kind of falling apart, and she just gave me the most beautiful guidance. And it turned out that she was the teacher of this course. It's her course in psychic development. And I was like, I'm going to join up. And yeah, I kind of liked the idea of being able to do readings for people. And I know that coming from a religious background, I think that there's this big like no against like psychics. Yeah, but obviously coming from the atheist background, I had none of those rules. I'm like, it's fine. And now I know that it's absolutely fine. But yeah, it was really, really enlightening to be able to given these tools to then read the energy of other people and give them guidance or reflect back things that only they had thought about, and just get that feedback of like, there's something to this sort of ether field that we are able to tap into and read like telepathically. And that just opened my eyes to so much more magic and open up this channel not only to other people's energy, but it felt like to this just divine energy, and all these like insights and just wisdom were coming through that were really helping the poetry that I was writing, and just this rapid transformation that I was having as well in my consciousness. And a lot of my poems are written from that perspective of like what I used to believe and this journey of what I now believe. And it helped me believe in my own guidance that I was getting a lot more, and just trusting that and following where I was led. And yeah, I was having all of this information about like how timelines work and all that, because a big part of psychic reading is about looking into someone's future and understanding, is it set in stone or are things destined, and all that kind of stuff, and just really kind of developing a picture. So yeah, this book is kind of like an amalgamation of all of these things that I was learning and that were kind of blowing my mind, but trying to come up with a story that put them in context. Yeah. Right. Yeah. With fiction, there's the right amount of fiction in there. So yeah.
I just want to say real quick that like your reading for me was really great. I would describe it as confirmation, because it's like, oh, I knew this about me, but it's like I didn't trust it, or I didn't know it as fully, and it's just like confirmation about myself, and it's just really encouraging. Yeah. And coming from a really religious background myself, it's just funny to me to see all the ways that spirit works, and all the ways people try to say the spirit can only work in this way, and if it works in this other way, then that's demonic, or that's bad, or that's not real. But it's just like, it works in so many different ways. You can't limit it. You can't control it. And so it's really beautiful when you can develop that relationship with it and trust in that, and not be in fear about, oh, it has to be this way or this way. You know what I'm saying? So, it's just, it's really beautiful.
And it really, I think that there is this big no-no, because it really brings that spiritual experience of like God and your guides and all of that, like internal, like you start to hear them and feel them. It's really, the class became not I started having these thoughts throughout classes that went further on. I did it for 12 months, that I didn't think that I wanted to be a reader in the end, but it wasn't so much about that anymore. It was about developing your intuition and understanding the language of it.
Empowerment.
Yeah, and these little, extrasensory gifts that we have access to, it's not something that you're born with, because I wasn't, and most of us weren't. They were in the class. It's something that if you choose to develop, you will get the gift.
Right. And I will say, I think that a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people will utilize that to some degree in their life. It's just about awareness of it. And then once you're aware, then increasing your skill and your awareness of it being there so that you can utilize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So your book.
Yeah. So the book, there are, epic poetry is definitely a genre that is out there. I'm not sure how popular it is these days. It's, you think of epic poetry and it's like Iliad and Homer's Odyssey and these things, which I have to admit I haven't read, but I didn't go into.
I did. They're okay.
Okay. I think I looked into them, and that's the thing about these poems. I feel like there is a level of difficulty in understanding them. I wanted to write, the idea behind my poetry is that the language is always really accessible. So I want to make these complex ideas that I'm talking about to be as accessible as possible. And it rhymes. The whole thing rhymes, which I don't think those typical epic poems generally do. I think there's a factor of rhythm and some rhyme, but this entirely in rhyme goes for about an hour and a half when read out. But because it is written in poetry, there's so much more you can say in a short period of time. When I thought about having to write this as a novel, I thought it was going to be a 3-part series. When I wrote it in poetry, it's done in 13,000 words. And I could kind of break rules.
Yeah, there's some amazing power in saying something complex in a simple way and saying something that we normally take lots of words, saying it in a few words. That I think it helps you slow down and just be like, whoa, what was that? And really contemplate it.
Yeah. And there are in saying that, because it is so quick and there's so much said in a short period of time, you pick up on different things every time you read it. So it's kind of depending on what your soul wants to hear or needs to hear, you'll pick up that and you'll be like, oh, wow, yeah. And then you'll read it the next time and you'll be pick up something else. And because it's short, I think that there's a definite benefit for that, because everyone is so time poor and there's so much competing for our attention. I wanted to make it short and accessible and something that people could feel comfortable reading multiple times. And I guess the idea behind it is a journey of awakening and a spiritual fable of sorts that I feel would have gotten through to me, to a younger me. Because I'll give you the premise, I guess. It's set in the future, 300 years in the future, so it's called 2318, and the Earth has essentially been deserted because AI ended up taking over and destroying everything. So we meet the main character, Sadie. She is an 18-year-old on board this ship called the Gardenia that is destined for a new Earth in the next solar system. So there's a fleet of about 10,000 people making their way over thousands of years to this new planet. I always have difficulty giving the synopsis not in poetry. I honestly feel like if I read the first chapter, it probably gives you a better idea of what it's about and what it sounds like than I can in explaining it. So I don't know if you mind if I read the first chapter out.
Yeah, that's great. Real quick, I wanted to say that I think that it's important for every generation to to write, to make news stories. Get to it. I don't want to get too into it, but like my Christian upbringing is like, well, we have the Bible and that's all we need. But even Christians are still preaching sermons and writing books and all this stuff. But I just see how it's important to, like you're saying about the Iliad, and it's older language. It's connected to like Greece and their culture and all that stuff, and so it takes some understanding and research, and it doesn't connect as much to us. And so, I just think it's important for everybody to continue to write new stories and new language to help us, one, connect with the eternal truths, which we need to be reminded of, but also two, to also speak to our individual context in as we progress, and like AI is a new thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think it's amazing what you did there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. The AI stuff, like it's so interesting once you set your mind on something like writing this book, just having the idea to write the book, how it set everything in motion to get me to the point where I would have the idea. And then having the idea, it's like all the thoughts and things that I needed to come across to be able to execute it would just, come into my awareness. And just having all these thoughts about AI coming from this person who didn't used to think at all, like it really just feels so magical. And it was such a beautiful experience.
Yeah. I actually had a podcast about AI, and I was actually thinking about it today, funnily enough. And a big part of that conversation was about kind of this free will versus programmed, or predestination is like the Christian language, but being controlled versus having free will and your own thoughts, and what is consciousness. And AI just kind of brings up this whole conversation again, and it's like, what is AI? Are they conscious? Are they not? And then what does that mean about us? And are we conscious, or how conscious, or is there a higher power that is controlling us or not? So it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like, that's an age-old concept that it's in Christianity. I see that that's been in there a long time. I'm sure it's been in lots of religions and different. And now AI, and then this new way, is bringing it up again, and we're continuing to learn and understand, and also be confounded.
Yeah. Oh my God, there's so much to think about and so many different angles to come at it from. Right. But yeah, for some reason, AI, it's definitely where my thought trains keep going, because this next book is about AI as well, and how our consciousness connects with that. And I've only just had the very start of the idea. I've written like the first couple of chapters, and this one, the other one, it was kind of like the full storyline, like came into me, and I knew kind of where it was going. I just had to fill it in. This one, I've got like where it starts, but I don't really know where it's going. And it's a lot more faith and trust and surrender coming to this one. So I'm excited to see where it goes. No idea how long it's going to take me. Could be years, but we'll see. But yeah, I can't. Can I read out the first chapter?
Yeah, go for it.
Just gives everybody an idea of this sort of what a sci-fi spiritual epic poem sounds like. Give me one sec. The year is 2318, and the Earth has been deserted. A fleet of humans travel deep through space so extinction can be averted. En route to the closest solar system, some 4.2 light years away, their destination, a brand new Earth, so they may live to see another day. It is here we meet a bright young girl. Tomorrow she will turn 18. But this milestone birthday is not Sadie's alone, for she was born as part of a team. Here I use born in the loosest of terms, for she has no natural mother. She was mixed in a dish and cooked in an oven, the same DNA as every other. Every 10 years a new cohort is born, 500 girls and 500 boys, made from the cells of the best and brightest. Such uniformity everybody enjoys. Their ship, the Gardenia, home to 10,000 souls, trusted to make the perilous flight. a trip only doable with fuel that's renewable, so she consumes the only one left in sight. The power of human creativity, an energy so long untapped, harvested in sleep through technology so unique that brain power never again remained trapped. Every night, before resting their heads, each passenger and the motherboard are linked. Within a program called Dreamscape, their imaginations run wild, the juice extracted out of every thought thinked. But this is a journey of such immensity that an 8-hour dream just won't do. So a whole human life is jammed into one night, but they have another reason for this too. Trapped on a ship for thousands of years is no way for humans to live. A life every night to maintain their humanity. So this gift, their descendants, they'll give. I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, that was great. I had a couple thoughts already. I think it's really cool that you obviously you talk about AI, but then you also bring in the energy. So it's so funny because it's like, our dualistic mind is like, okay, is there science? And like AI is part of that. And then there's spirituality and there's like energy. And, depending on which side you're on, you're like, well, energy isn't real, if you're in the science. And then in your spiritual, you might be like, well, the science that there's a lot of evil there or something. But again, like we were talking about with AI, it's getting back into that. It's helping us think again about consciousness and what makes humans unique. And then what is AI? What is that consciousness? And again, how is energy interplaying with humans and AI or not,
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think that there's also like this is something I haven't really thought too deeply on, but I know your friend Brandy, how she would get messages through like a TiVo or something like that.
Yeah.
That maybe, there's spirits that kind of come into the AI messages that we get sent through and like deliver us what we need to receive.
Yeah.
You would think that if that's possible, then that's possible as well. But I think that we have to remember, like, AI, as smart as it is, like, we're the ones who created it. Like, we are that's pretty impressive. And I think it is going to really, when those sort of intellectual processes are taken care of, it gives us more an opportunity to tap into these spiritual abilities that humans have that we've sort of not really explored before. It's like, okay, we don't need to focus on that anymore. I don't need to memorize all of these things or build up knowledge in all of these different areas. Where is my soul wanting to lead me next? And understanding more about what makes us humans and these, additional power that we have.
Yeah, it's like we have our place and AI has their place, and AI has a potential to take some responsibility and some of our tasks away. But again, like you're saying, I think that helps us tap into more of our, you could say, feminine and creative side, imagination, that type of thing that AI doesn't have the same ability to do. For sure.
And I think the journey of finding our own gifts, like freeing up that time to find out what we are passionate about and what lights us up, and seeing where that takes us, because that's a big part of the book, and it's been a big part of my journey since having my awakening. It's, that's, I think, forget about money, forget about fame. The goal is like the gift, finding the gift that was, put in your soul for you to share with the world. And
and when we do that and we shine that forth, then that attracts other people, because they're like, that's something special, that's something you don't see every day. But that also helps them reflect and be like, oh, I want that. Like, what is that inside of me? What am I called to? What is my passion? So it's like the butterfly, or what is that? The pebble in the pond, and
the ripple effect. Yeah, for sure. there is just that side of it, like that we've been so conditioned to not, especially in Australia, I've talked to you about this before, the tall poppy syndrome of not standing out, that fear of being seen and standing out. Like, I think I've used poetry also as a way to like share these like crazy thoughts that I was having, but you know, hide it under a pseudonym and write it in art. Right. It's like, I have so much to say. Art is such a beautiful way to express that, but it's been a massive journey on coming out and putting my name to it and owning these things that I'm talking about. Yeah.
I think it's steps, you know, like for me, you know, I told you before the podcast, like speaking my truth and my voice and bringing my full who I am. I'm still on that journey. I'm on the next step of that. But you know, it was a process. I had a blog and no one read it. I just wrote it out. Well, first of all, I just talked about my spiritual journey with people privately, individually. And then I wrote my blog, and then that was hard. And then it became easier, and it was healing in a way and helpful. And then I started my podcast, and that was really hard and scary. Yeah. And, you know, now I'm becoming a life coach, and I'm marketing myself and doing videos, and that's hard, but I'm sure it'll get easier and I'll get comfortable with that. And so it's just this process of coming out more and finding out, oh, you know what, it's okay. And you're going to be okay. And actually this is really helpful. And I mean, that's also the process of spiritual growth and coaching, what that helps, and becoming more of who you truly are, and finding that there's obviously challenges, but there's also safety in that. In the end, it bears more fruit. It's better than sticking where we are and getting stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the big part of what I believe, you know, the atheist world is missing, is that faith or trust in a higher power, or this, you know, path that's meant for you, or inner guidance, like that fear of the unknown, and not even knowing that you're afraid of it. Like it's, you just get stuck. And that's something that I want to share with people. And that's,
Yeah. I think like my awakening, you know, it was very physical, very energetic, very feeling, and just that. And even after the whole month after my awakening was like flying high, and I had literally like zero fear. And, you know, I have a lot of compassion for other people because they haven't had that experience. So, you know, I don't think they have the same amount of like safety feeling that I do. And of course, you know, even me, I'm like, oh, I forget all the time, and I still get anxious and scared and whatever, even though I've had that experience. So, you know, even though I had this amazing, powerful experience, even I forget and get scared. So I can have even more compassion for other people that haven't had this experience.
100%. And it is definitely is a journey, because I had that Kundalini awakening as well. Not too long before everything in my life fell apart. And yeah, just having this like full connection, like it just felt like this connection to everything. And what was I going to say? And yes, but yeah, you do forget. I actually had this experience recently where I got into like a little bit of a car. We call it a bingle here in Australia, but I think you guys call it a fender bender. A bingle. Bingle. Where it was a really strange experience. This like guy's door from his work vehicle was like left up, and he drove with it, and then it got smashed into the side of a bus and was like stuck there. And then as I came under, the door fell on top of my car, and I was just like, oh no. And usually in those experiences, you're like, oh, everything's against me. Like, I'm just like, why me? But I just went through it. I was like, no, like I'm still supported. Like for whatever reason, I'm meant to have this experience. And I just kind of flowed through it with like this serenity. And it felt like a real kind of milestone from coming where I was and how I would usually react to a situation like that.
Yeah. It can be really exciting when you're like, oh, this experience that it's this external experience that I'm having that would put me in this internal state of fight or flight or, spiraling thoughts, all that. And then is no longer doing that. That's so amazing. Like, I want to increase this. I want to continue this. And then it's like this build up of momentum.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just trust that you can handle, whatever comes your way. And I think that like the fear of the unknown, just going back to that, I think that is like the biggest fear that I have only recently kind of gotten over. And especially after everything fell apart, I became very reliant on psychic readings. Being part of that class, I was getting psychic readings all the time because we were practicing with each other. And I feel like I became kind of dependent on them. But since then, I've like let go of all of it and simply just trusting the voices within. And it just, I'm just trying to stay open to just the infinite possibility and trusting. It sounds crazy coming from an atheist, but like trusting God's plan, or like trusting, like, I call it in the book, I refer to it as your highest timeline. And that's kind of bringing in this, quantum physics, scientific version of it. And the highest timeline is talked about quite a lot in like New Age spirituality. But for me, that's just the dream life that your soul, came in wanting to achieve. And it's not about like the fame and the fortune and the money. It's about the lessons. The lessons you wanted to learn, and the gifts that you wanted to foster, and the service that you wanted to provide to the world. And and the book kind of explores the idea of how we get lost from these timelines or destined plans, or the different things that throw us off track. And after those lives are lived, coming out of it, and Sadie's back on the ship and reflecting on what she's learned from each of these lives and what can I do better next. And then getting to this point where she's able to live her highest timeline, and it's really about just trusting and surrendering and following your heart, and wanting to be of service. I think the Christian term would be like living in the fruits of the Spirit, living in the Spirit, and living your life in like mirrored to like Jesus and the way he lived his life. So there's some connection as well. But so I think you really also kind of, touched on like metaphysics and, again, with the timelines, and then also like when there's this concept in spirituality about like, when you go to sleep, you're like working in the astral or something. And, are you actually, do we have it backwards? Are we actually asleep on this earth? And then that is actually being awake. And so really like trips out your mind, and your ego is like, what? And your book really messes with you in that kind of Well, that's it. Like if I can go to sleep and have a dream where I create this entire reality and these situations, and there's other people in there, and these crazy designs and architecture, why could I not be creating all of this as like and we learn things in our dreams and we express things, and it could just be a bigger, wilder, more advanced version of that. But also the technology side of it plays into it, because it's like 300 years in the future. What will simulations be like? They will be so indistinguishable from reality that, maybe we can upload all of this data in and create these worlds as big as the world,
Right. Yeah. Actually, I had an idea that I wrote a little bit. I didn't write a whole book, but I had an idea about like the future using like VR, and how the government might kind of get people stuck in using virtual reality, and then kind of using them for whatever they want. And these people wanting to escape and getting stuck more in VR than this life. And
I think that is the scary part, is because, you know, and there's also like the psychedelic part of it where, like, you know, drugs like ayahuasca or DMT, substances, I should say, they can distort your perception of time, and you can be, you know, kind of out of 15 minutes, but
and we know
feel
that our Kundalini awakening is the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It can do that to you as well.
Yeah. So maybe we can create these virtual realities where it feels like a lifetime, but in reality, it's only 8 hours.
Right.
I forgot what I was going to say from there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the benefit, the fruit I see from kind of focusing on metaphysics and these different things is not getting to, it's kind of this a Buddhist idea of detachment and not getting so attached to what happens externally, in just what can we do internally to make this the smoothest ride for us, and where we're learning and benefiting and growing and healing, and then also how we can then do that for ourselves to then help others do the same for themselves.
Absolutely. And I remember the thing I was going to say, it's like not getting trapped in wanting to escape this reality and go into these other realities. And that's kind of what this book is about. It's trying to like rip people out of these like escapes from where they are right now. Because, you know, you get into that reality, it might just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's like, you know, these dimensions that we talk about, and the fifth dimension being where our souls reside. And in that dimension, they're coming into this world that they've created for us to learn from. But that doesn't mean we should want to escape that world and create one else, like, you know, get trapped in that one.
Yeah, I think it's like a both and rather than like either or. Kind of like I was talking about earlier, like I think the Gnostics kind of were onto this idea of the like, hey, there's different dimensions, different levels, but it's like, it's not all like one is evil and one is good. It's like they each have lessons to teach us, and it's not like trying to escape one for the other. It's like part of us is in one, part of us is in the other, and they're all interconnected. And how do we, I say a lot of times, like oneness and duality, how do we keep both perspectives and try to keep that balance? And, you know, me and Brandy are actually planning on writing a book about like Jesus and how he talked about the kingdom of heaven and how that's now and it's also in the future, and about, you know, the 3D and the 5D and how we try to keep both in mind and bring the 5D to 3D. But yeah, just so that all of that.
It's all very interesting. This crazy where your mind can go. I look forward to reading that. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, and I look very forward to reading your next book.
The next one.
Right.
I really can't give too much. I can't give too much away about that one, I don't think. There's still too much to think about and contemplate. Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about? And we've kind of touched on it, but just like the evolution of consciousness.
Yeah. So part of this book that I've written was really about imagining a society 300 years in the future. That I think we have touched on it, that, you know, that can live in harmony with AI and what happens, and we can use it for good. And there's this line that says AI has taken over most of the jobs, leaving humans to pursue their calling. If it requires heart and soul, only man can do the role. It doesn't matter what program you're installing. And just, it's like when you follow your passions, your gifts, and want to share them with the world in a positive way for the upliftment of everyone. I say it's not just your highest timeline. It's not I'm on my highest timeline to the exclusion of whatever. My highest timeline is everyone's highest timeline.
Yeah.
And this is this mantra that I'd started kind of working on because I shared my truth and followed my heart and everything fell apart. I just had to remind myself that I did what's best for me, and staying in that situation that wasn't good for me was not good for anyone. And this temporary hurt, ultimately I want to do something good from this, and people can do it from any part of their life that they're in. Like, it's that redemption and salvation. It doesn't matter what you've done in your past. From this very moment right now, you can say, I'm on my highest timeline and I want to do the best for myself and for everyone else, because my highest timeline is ultimately everyone's highest timeline.
Right.
And and having that faith that, you're guided along that, and that is what your soul wants, and that's what Source or God wants for you as well. Right. And then just watching the magic unfold, because it will come. Like, you will get the confirmation you need, and you will be guided along the way. And if, it's this idealism of this world peace that I think we kind of need to come into alignment with.
Right.
And knowing that,
Sorry, I was just saying, I think so often we get caught up in this changing the world and changing society and changing the external. Yeah. And then we try to change others or change systems. And we forget that true change and true lasting change that that is the least harmful starts from the inside. You can an example that just came to mind is like America, we've gone so much into the Middle East and mess with governments, and we're like, okay, here's our guy, and we try to put this guy in charge, and then it becomes another corrupt government. It's like, until you change it inward, until we change ourselves, then the outward system is just a reflection of that. Just Absolutely. Like AI is a reflection of us. So we're like, oh, AI is saying this, evil stuff. It's just regurgitating what we already put in on the internet.
That's because you looked it up. I definitely had fear around AI and like what it was going to do. And I had resistance to using ChatGPT when it first came out. But if your intentions are good, it's about you and your intentions, and moving with good intentions, and watching that ripple out and attract others of like mind, and just creating the life that you want to live and the legacy you want to leave. Yeah.
I think another way to say it is kind of David Hawkins. I read his book Power versus Force, and how power is more powerful than force. And a lot of times we think of power in a negative way, but what he's saying is, force is you're pushing against something. You're trying to make these external changes. You're trying to change people, change these. Power is like the state of being that you truly are at your source, and that lasts longer, and that creates less resistance and push against people, and that they feel and can see that power, and then they respond to that, and it's for the greater good, the highest timeline.
100%. It definitely all starts within, and it starts it starts with not, if you're in a battle inside your head, that's what's going to be projected outwards as well. It's really coming into that self-awareness and aware of your thoughts and how they're reverberating through the ether. It really does come down to like that connection to your spirit and with Source, and a higher power.
And that realization, and that there is a higher power, and it's here for our good, and drawing us to him or it or whatever. That creates that safety that allows us to have faith and to take these leaps that, on the surface to a non-spiritual person someone doesn't believe in God or higher power is going to be like, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. Or
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's dangerous. But we're like, God is calling us to this, and we have trust. And even if external things happen that seem negative, we know that in the end it'll be good, and it'll be for our highest timeline.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, this is a beautiful conversation. Really enjoyed it. Do you have any final thoughts?
I will say, if anyone is interested in reading 2318, I have soft published it. Like, I haven't, it's just in audio format. For whatever reason, I do not feel called to sell it on Amazon or anything right now, but it is available at my website. So it's amyfelicityrobinson.com, and you can just download a copy of 2318 in audio format. If you read it, please leave me a review. I would love to know what you think. And then, you can also find me on Instagram at amyfelicity.poetry. I am having a little hiatus, but I will probably be back soon with your regular poetry programming. But we'll see where things go after that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you produce in the future. And I'll put your links in the bio, the podcast bio as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Always enjoy our talks and just your presence.
Oh, you too. Thank you so much, Kendall.
Thanks.